Draft for a statement of human obligations. Profession of faith. There is a reality outside the world, that is to say, outside space and time, outside man's mental universe, outside any sphere whatsoever that is accessible to human faculties. Corresponding to this reality, at the center of the human heart, is a longing for an absolute good, a longing which is always there and is never appeased by any object in this world. Another terrestrial manifestation of this reality lies in the absurd and insoluble contradictions which are always the terminus of human thought when it moves exclusively in this world. Just as the reality of this world is the sole foundation of facts, so that other reality is the sole foundation of good. That reality is the unique source of all the good that can exist in this world, that is to say, all beauty, all truth, all justice, all legitimacy, all order, and all human behavior that is mindful of obligations. Those minds whose attention and love are turned towards that reality are the sole intermediary through which good can descend from there and come among men. Although it is beyond the reach of any human faculties, man has the power of turning his attention and love towards it. Nothing can ever justify the assumption that any man, whoever he may be, has been deprived of this power. It is a power which is only real in this world insofar as it is exercised. The sole condition for exercising it is consent. This act of consent may be expressed, or may not be, even tacitly. It may not be clearly conscious, although it has really taken place in the soul. Very often, it is verbally expressed, although it has not in fact taken place. But, whether expressed or not, the one condition suffices, that it shall in fact have taken place. To anyone who does actually consent to directing his attention and love beyond the world, towards the reality that exists outside the reach of all human faculties, it is given to succeed in doing so. In that case, sooner or later, there descends upon him a part of the good, which shines through him upon all that surrounds him. The combination of these two facts, the longing in the depth of the heart for absolute good, and the power, though only latent, of directing attention and love to a reality beyond the world, and of receiving good from it, constitutes a link which attaches every man without exception to that other reality. Whoever recognizes that reality recognizes also that link. Because of it, he holds every human being without any exception as something sacred to which he is bound to show respect. This is the only possible motive for universal respect towards all human beings, whatever formulation of belief or disbelief a man may choose to make. If his heart inclines him to feel this respect, then he in fact also recognizes a reality other than the world's reality. Whoever in fact does not feel this respect is alien to that other reality also. The reality of the world we live in is composed of variety. Unequal objects unequally solicit our attention. Certain people personally attract our attention, either through hazard of circumstances or some chance affinity. For the lack of such circumstance or affinity, other people remain unidentified. They escape our attention, or, at the most, it only sees them as items of a collectivity. If our attention is entirely confined to this world, and it is entirely subject to the effect of these inequalities, which it is all the less able to resist because it is unaware of it, it is impossible to feel equal respect for things that are in fact unequal, unless respect is given to something that is identical in all of them. Men are unequal in all their relations with the things of this world, without exception. The only thing that is identical in all men is the presence of a link with the reality outside the world. All human beings are absolutely identical, insofar as they can be thought of as consisting of a center, which is an unquenchable desire for good, surrounded by an accretion of psychical and bodily matter. Only by really directing the attention beyond the world can there be real contact with the central and essential fact of human nature. Only an attention thus directed possesses the faculty, always identical in all cases, of irradiating with light any human being whatsoever. If anyone possesses this faculty, then his attention is in reality directed beyond the world, whether he is aware of it or not. The link which attaches the human being to the reality outside the world is, like the reality itself, beyond the reach of human faculties. The respect that it inspires as soon as it is recognized cannot be expressed to it. This respect cannot, in this world, find any form of direct expression, but unless it is expressed, it has no existence. There is a possibility of indirect expression for it. The respect inspired by the link between man and the reality outside the world can be expressed to that part of man which exists in the reality of this world. The reality of this world is necessity. The part of man which is in this world is the part which is in bondage to necessity and the subject to the misery of need. The one possibility of indirect expression of respect for the human being is offered by men's needs, the needs of the soul and of the body, in this world. It is based upon the connection in human nature between the desire for the good, which is the essence of man, and his sensibility. There is never any justification for doubting the existence in any man of this connection. Because of it, when a man's life is destroyed or damaged by some wound or privation of soul or body, which is due to other men's actions or negligence, it is not only his sensibility that suffers, but also his aspiration towards the good. Therefore, there has been sacrilege towards that which is sacred in him. On the other hand, there are cases where it is only a man's sensibility that is affected. For example, where his wound or privation is solely the result of the blind working of natural forces, or where he recognizes that the people who seem to be making him suffer are far from bearing him any ill will, but are actively solely in obedience to a necessity which he also acknowledges. The possibility of indirect expression of respect for the human being is the basis of obligation. Obligation is concerned with the needs in this world of the souls and bodies of human beings, whoever they may be. For each need there is a corresponding obligation. For each obligation, a corresponding need. There is no other kind of obligation, so far as human affairs are concerned. If there seem to be others, they are either false, or else it is only by error that they have not been classed among the obligations mentioned. Anyone whose attention and love are really directed towards the reality outside the world recognizes at the same time that he is bound, both in public and private life, by the single and permanent obligation to remedy, according to his responsibilities and to the extent of his power, all the privations of soul and body which are liable to destroy or damage the earthly life of any human being whatsoever. This obligation cannot legitimately be held to be limited by the insufficiency of power or the nature of the responsibilities, until everything possible has been done to explain the limitation to those who will suffer by it. The explanation must be completely truthful, and must be such as to make it possible for them to acknowledge the necessity. No combination of circumstances ever cancels this obligation. If there are circumstances which seem to cancel it as regards a certain man or category of men, they impose it in fact all the more imperatively. The thought of this obligation is present to all men, but in very different forms and in very varying degrees of clarity. Some men are more and some are less inclined to accept or to refuse it as their rule of conduct. Its acceptance is usually mixed with self-deception, and even when it is quite sincere, it is not consistently acted upon. To refuse it is to become criminal. The proportions of good and evil in any society depend partly upon the proportion of consent to that of refusal, and partly upon the distribution of power between those who consent and those who refuse. If any power of any kind is in the hands of a man who has not given total, sincere, and enlightened consent to this obligation, such power is misplaced. If man has willfully refused to consent, then it is in itself a criminal activity for him to exercise any function, major or minor, public or private, which gives him control over people's lives. All those who, with knowledge of his mind, have acquiesced in his exercise of the function are accessories to the crime. Any state whose whole official doctrine constitutes an incitement to this crime is itself wholly criminal. It can retain no trace of legitimacy. Any state whose official doctrine is not primarily directed against this crime is in all of its forms, is lacking in full legitimacy. Any legal system which contains no provisions against this crime is without the essence of legality. Any legal system which provides against some forms of this crime, but not others, is without the full character of legality. Any government whose members commit this crime, or authorize it in their subordinates, has betrayed its function. Any collectivity, institution, or form of collective life whatsoever whose normal functioning implies or induces the practice of this crime is convicted ipso facto of illegitimacy and should be reformed or abolished. Any man who has any degree of influence, however small, upon public opinion becomes an accessory to this crime if he refrains from denouncing it whenever it comes to his knowledge, or if he purposely avoids knowledge of it in order not to have to denounce it. A country is not innocent of this crime if public opinion, being free to express itself, does not denounce any current examples of it, or if, freedom of expression being forbidden, the crime is not denounced clandestinely. It is the aim of public life to arrange that all forms of power are entrusted, so far as possible, to men who effectively consent to be bound by the obligation towards all human beings, which lies upon everyone, and to understand the obligation. Law is the totality of the permanent provisions for making this aim effective. To understand the obligation involves two things: understanding the principle and understanding its application. Since it is with human needs in this world that the application is concerned, it is for the intelligence to conceive the idea of need and to discern, discriminate, and enumerate, with all the accuracy of which it is capable, the earthly needs of the soul and of the body. This is a study which is permanently open to revision.